I sometimes torture myself by imagining what kind of world my grandchildren might occupy, and if I utilise a combination of environmental predictions and a general lack of faith in the human species, I can conjure up an image that looks a bit like this.
Humans have successfully mined, extracted and consumed their way into oblivion. Rising temperatures and sea levels have caused a global spate of natural disasters. A mass environmental refugee crisis has caused geopolitical instability and increased the potential for war, and millions of people inside this dystopian hellscape are both suffering and dying.
In another word, bad. So what if there's another way?
Perhaps a world in which we've transitioned to renewable energy, reused, repaired and recycled materials to eliminate waste and minimise unnecessary extraction. A world in which pollution is scarce, the air is amenably breathable, and we're not actively at war with the plants and trees that keep us alive.
Well, this is, in part, the illustrious promise of a circular economy. Simply put, it's a world in which humans live by their means, in harmony with the earth, rather than, prodding the earth about like a beehive until we get predictably hurt.
It's the oldest concept on the earth. So nature is basically a bioeconomy which is organized on the principles of circular economy. Nothing is lost. Everything has its own purpose. So for the beginning, we should probably answer only one question. Do we agree that we humans are part of the nature too?
But the road to a circular economy is paved with challenges and contradictions, and requires somewhat of a rehaul in terms of the structure of global industry.
So how do we, get that started?
Well, one environmental conundrum we currently face as a species is the issue of mining.
Those special little critical minerals you've heard so much about, the ones in your phones, screens, toasters and military jets, rather unfortunately need to be extracted from their ores.
And the process of extracting them can be problematic. For a start, there's the obvious question: are we going to run out? After all, there's a finite supply of these minerals in the Earth's crust, set against an apparently limitless demand for phones, toasters and military jets.
Well, the answer is a little complicated.
When we talk about minerals, we use the words resource and reserve. Resource is the amount of a geologic commodity in existence, i.e. the total amount of copper hanging around underground.
So resource pretty much means best guess of total amount. We don't know.
On the other hand, reserves are known quantities that have been discovered, measured, and can be effectively and economically mined, i.e. how much copper we're currently aware of that's profitable to extract.
Now, although resource amounts aren't precisely known, geological estimates tell us there's still plenty to go around. We're not aware of any minerals that are likely to disappear anytime soon.
However, despite this, the supplies of many key critical minerals, like indium, the thing that lets you touch your phone for hours in a state of brainless self-pity, are at risk.
Indium is much scarcer than other elements and doesn't occur at high enough concentrations to be profitably extracted on its own at the present. Because of this, it's typically only produced as a byproduct of zinc smelting.
So whilst estimates for indium quantities as a natural resource still predict there's a lot of it, actually getting it is somewhat of an issue. As current indium reserves are depleted and new technologies increase the demand, extracting indium could become more costly and result in shortages.
So no, we're not literally running out of the world's indium, but if supply doesn't meet demand, we could still end up in quite the sticky situation.
We need lots of these things to make wind turbines, to make solar panels and so on. So there's a risk that we won't be able to scale up production of those really quite essential technologies.
Now, the other issue is mining itself. The mining and metal industry contributes to around 8% of our global carbon footprint. As well as creating carbon emissions, mining can contaminate soil and water, leak toxic waste, damage local biodiversity and cause deathly accidents.
No one wants a mine in their backyard. There's all sorts of arguments that often erupt between mining companies, particularly foreign mining companies and governments, as to how to divide the benefits from mines. And there's a lot of, in many countries, quite rightly, there's a lot of permitting processes and environmental regulations that need to be complied with, all of which is quite right, but it means that it can take 10, 15 years or more between discovering a resource to actually be able to dig it out of the ground. And the time frames for the energy transition are very tight now.
As we deplete current reserves of critical minerals, humanity is looking to new frontiers. For instance, there's currently somewhat of a heated debate about deep seabed mining.
Proponents argue that this would be more environmentally sustainable than mining on land. On the other hand, many researchers think that mining the bottom of the sea is maybe not so genius, on account of the fact that we know so pathetically little about the underwater world, and our historic interactions with the land world leave something to be desired.
There are a lot of unknowns at the moment about the impacts of deep seabed mining, both in terms of the time scales that those impacts might last, but also the size of area that might be impacted by deep seabed mining. And the ocean is really important in making sure that our Earth remains a livable planet. As the RSC, we think that there's a need for scientific evidence to be really front and centre in the decision-making process, and that there needs to be a really cautious approach to making those decisions.
Other scientists are looking to space for an alternative, humouring the possibility of mining asteroids.
But of course, it was only as recent as 1957 that we sent a dog to die in space for the first time.
Space exploration is a relatively new thing, so it's difficult to gauge humanity's mining capabilities beyond Earth's atmosphere, as well as the cost-effectiveness of such a venture. Ultimately, we're going to need to continue to mine as we transition from fossil fuels. But mining still pollutes, damages ecosystems and the health of local communities, and creates waste. And a lot of mining isn't directed towards crucial things like wind farms, it's directed towards that new phone that has a 6th camera or whatever.
So to recap, we're not running out of minerals, but there are massive supply chain risks with many of the ones we need. Mining has impacts on the environment, but is also necessary to transition to green energy. Confusing and contradictory, I know. Now, obviously, we need to make sure that extraction is done in a way that minimises environmental and social impacts. But what if there was something else that could help reduce the need for so much mining?
Circular economy is actually a kind of opposite of the linear economy. A linear economy which extracts, produce, consume, throw away, and then start at the beginning with extraction. Circular economy does things in a different way. So it tries to preserve the value of the resources. Waste, for example, it's not seen as a problem anymore, but rather as an opportunity, as a new resource. Circular economy has many faces. Often it's wrongly perceived only as a recycling, because this is actually the easiest part. We could indeed start by minimizing waste and pollution through the reuse, repair, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose. And finally, we could land up with the approach where we would better design the systems leading to the reduction of resources and product use. Systems like mobility, systems like food system, nutrition system, systems like housing. So this latter part is still very much missing from existing approaches. Sometimes circular economy solutions are simply not economically attractive due to the fact that nature, or better, depleting nature, is not valued and part of the costs which are considered by the markets. First, we would need to shift from humans, which are today pretty much in function of economic success, to an economy where economy would be in function of delivering human needs. We must shift from an economy which is considering humans as external and superior to nature, to an economy which is acknowledging that we are part of nature. Destroying nature is simply destroying ourselves. So we should stop stimulating extraction-based economic success and reward responsible, innovative, creative ways of meeting human needs. And finally, we would need to shift from short-term based interest governance structures and logic to sharing sovereignty. So we must improve this collective resilience. And I would dare to say that we need a very convincing intergenerational pact, because it's the young generation who is ready to change. And I think it's pretty much important that we understand, because sometimes we really tend to focus on the short-term policies, that taking painkillers to remove the acute pain will not heal the chronic diseases. Rather, will hide them and make them actually worse.
There are many practical changes we could make to move towards a circular economy, like legislating product design or subsidizing the reuse of materials. But there are also much bigger holistic changes we could make to our entire economic system. What if we no longer consumed products, we just used them? Does everyone need to own a washing machine, a drill, a car? Cars, after all, are just parked 95% of the time. If we rented products, we could reduce the amount of critical minerals and mining required to produce them. And when your car or your refrigerator broke, it wouldn't be your problem. So maybe then it would be in manufacturers' interest to make them repairable. Rather than an ownership economy, we could live in an access economy, one that prioritized human needs over growth. What if governments, rather than making promises based on 4-year cycles for the purpose of getting re-elected, made longer-term commitments to younger generations and properly invested in the future? A circular economy isn't just about recycling, it's about changing our entire economic philosophy as a species. But really, at its core, it's quite simple. A world in which everything remains in the system.
Sort of like how your we eventually becomes rain, and then water, and then we again, if that makes it easier to visualize.
We'll need to mine a lot more minerals as we transition to a greener world, but this could have a net positive contribution to the environment.
And with global collaboration, legislation could ensure stronger environmental regulation in the mining industry worldwide, making it safer for local communities and habitats. The idea of a circular economy might sound like an enormous departure from our current species-wide philosophy of abusing Earth like we've got a few more spare Earths lying about somewhere, and that's why it's so important we take it seriously. Our planet and way of life is in seriously big trouble, and this could be one of our last hopes of seriously fixing things. So how achievable that is really comes down to just how serious we're willing to be.